Hello, everybody, and welcome. It's great to see you all here today. My name is Dr. Emma Jackson, and I was co-chair of the Phase 1 of the Advisory Council. We have the First Minister, we have Minister McKelvey, we have Scottish Government senior leaders and officials joining the Advisory Council and Circle members here today to help support the launch of the Phase 2 of the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. We are recording this event and will share it with members who couldn't attend today. We have two BSL interpreters supporting us today, Jill and Rachel, and they will take turns to interpret each session. You will hear first from the First Minister soon, but before that, we wanted to do a quick recap on what we have achieved during Phase 1. So let me now hand over to my co-chair for Phase 1, Louise MacDonald.
Hi there, everybody, and thank you so much, Emma. It's wonderful to be with you all, and I'm delighted to add my welcome today. It's great to see you all together in this space, and I hope everyone's doing okay today. Now, this is a significant transition moment in the life of the First Minister's National Advisory Council on Women and Girls, as some of us step away from this work and others pick up the baton. And of course, our work was interrupted by a terrible pandemic, which showed everyone just how deep-rooted inequalities and its impact on women and girls are. And that's continuing every day. And we want to acknowledge that for the many women and girls across Scotland and their families and communities. If ever we needed hard evidence of the impact of inequalities, there it was. And we must learn the lessons from that. But as we sit here in this moment this afternoon, and for me, with the snow just disappearing, two things are at front of mind. A sense of pride in what we have achieved as a collective endeavour so far, and a recognition that this work is not yet done. Phase 1 was the beginning. The key now is implementation and the scrutiny of that implementation. This work, we believe, will change the lives of communities in Scotland, women and girls, men and boys, and all people, regardless of gender. When we began the council, we entered this space knowing that a lot of excellent and urgent work was already taking place in Scotland, particularly relating to violence against women and girls. And we had a very strong sense of not wanting to duplicate work or get in the way of that, but instead to enhance and add value. And we came to the conclusion that this could be best achieved by concentrating on systemic change. It's the famous Bishop Tutu's speech about when you see people in the river floating past you, yes, you have to pull them out, but someone also has to go upriver to find out why people are falling in. So we went upriver. We also knew that we needed to start to build a wider cross-section coalition around this work so that it becomes everyone's business to contribute to change in this space. We wanted to bring in more allies, including men and boys, which is why we formed our circle. And we are so grateful to all of you, those who have been with us since day one, and others who have joined us along the way. We've engaged via specialist roundtables across the lifetime of the council, including gender experts and grassroots women's organisations, Black women and women of colour, the business community, young people, disabled women, marginalised women, and we've co-produced in many ways with that inclusive design approach, which meant Phase 1 developed a strong set of recommendations informed by what you, our circle and others, told us was important. We also knew it wouldn't be of value to continue with the Phase 1 model as a static thing. For a start, you can't just keep loading recommendations into the system. You'll probably just make it grind to a halt, to be honest. So we put a lot of thought into the design of our recommendations as a cohesive set, taking that intersectional approach and being very intentional about how the package of recommendations combined should transform the system if they are taken forward collectively with energy and in the spirit in which they are intended. Fragmentation is a risk from this point on, because they are systemic change recommendations designed to stop poor outcomes happening at source. So they're bold, and yes, they're complex, but that doesn't mean it can't be done. Quite the opposite. And it must be done. It must be done because the women and girls of Scotland, and all women and girls, all people regardless of their gender identity, deserve nothing less. So we are pleased that the Scottish Government has accepted our recommendations and the First Minister has endorsed them, recognising that some are in principle due to the devolved context, but all with some aspect of action already committed. So the role of the next Advisory Council in scrutinising this action is vital. Leading the Phase 1 Advisory Council with co-chair Dr. Emma Jackson was an immeasurable privilege, and I can't thank you, Emma, enough for your incredible leadership, wisdom, grace and expertise. But we both knew a different skill set was required to lead Phase 2, and so we are now confidently handing over the baton to two outstanding women, Talat Yaqub and Anna Ritchie-Allen, and a strong, refreshed Advisory Council. We have every confidence that Phase 2 will be as bold and influential as Phase 1 was, and although I'm personally stepping back from this work, I will be following it closely and will always be a champion. It genuinely has been the privilege of a lifetime to be part of this, and acknowledging that we stand on the shoulders of so many incredible women. I want to pay tribute to members of the First Advisory Council. It's been an honour to work with you and learn from so much from all of you. We've also laughed a lot, which has been wonderful. And to all members of the circle, thank you for your insight, challenge and ambition so far. We also want to acknowledge the incredible contribution of the late Emma Rich, who was a member of our council. We know that everyone here and so many more miss her every single day. So thank you, Emma, for everything. So we've come a long way since December 2017 and our first meeting, but there is much, much more to do. And the news reminds us of that most days. So thank you for being on this journey with us so far, and please do continue. The systems which cause such negative impacts on women and girls have been made, so therefore they can be unmade, they can be remade. The issue that came up at our circle sessions more than any other was, who needs to be held accountable and how do we do that? So this is your chance to be part of defining the answer to those questions. We need your energy and expertise to ensure we achieve the changes we all want to see. And there is no doubt that this is urgent work. The most recent survey from Girl Guiding Scotland revealed that 67% of girls have experienced sexual harassment from other students at school, rising to 87% for 17 to 18-year-olds. 80% of girls feel unsafe when out on their own, rising to 96% for 17 to 18-year-olds. Now, I could pick out so many other stats to demonstrate the urgency of this and why it matters. And I know you will each have your own that drive and motivate you. So keep that fire burning inside you and put it to good use alongside the council. So as I close, I want to thank the Minister, Christina McKelvey, for her unstinting and generous support throughout this time. What a true champion for equalities you are, Minister, and we are so thankful to have you with us. And to the First Minister for tasking us with this work. At our first meeting, you asked us to make your life difficult. I'm not sure if you regret that or not, First Minister, and I mean this in the kindest way possible. I really hope we have. The First Minister's strong support for gender equality has inspired and motivated us as a council to be courageous and to aim high in our ambitions for change. And so we hope that we have done that trust justice. So thank you, First Minister. Without your original vision for an advisory council and your justified impatience for bold transformative action, the opportunity for systemic change that these recommendations now offer wouldn't exist. So that brings me to a close, and now to invite you, First Minister, to say some words about your reflections on the work we've done so far and your future ambitions for the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. Thank you.
Thank you, and hi everyone. Thank you very much for joining us today. Louise, Emma, thank you from the bottom of my heart to both of you for your leadership of the council, but also for sharing those thoughtful reflections with us today. At the very outset, can I take the opportunity to echo everything you said, Louise, about Emma Rich. Emma made such an invaluable contribution to the work of this group, but also over many years to the wider feminist movement in Scotland. And I know we all feel her loss every day, but we feel it particularly keenly on a day like this. Now, as Louise has just set out, today's meeting marks the start of a new phase for the National Advisory Council on Women and Girls. So I'm really delighted that we've been joined by both original and new members of the council, and by so many supporters from the wider circle. This is an opportunity to look ahead and to discuss the role that the council will play over the next 3 years. And it's an opportunity to inform that future work by sharing knowledge and experience from the council's first phase. When I first established the Advisory Council way back in 2017, I did say then that I wanted it to be a powerful voice, challenging government and society to make further progress in tackling gender inequality. I did say be bold, and Louise was right. I said make my life difficult, and I'm glad to say collectively that is exactly what you have been and exactly what you have done. Over the course of 3 reports, you have produced recommendations that cover virtually every aspect of life in our country, from education, the economy and justice, to policy making and electoral politics. These recommendations have been thoughtful, they have been extremely ambitious, and they have been rightly bold. And they've been aimed squarely at bringing about the kind of systemic change that we need to see to improve the lives of women and girls, not just now, but into the future. As Louise has said, the Scottish Government has accepted virtually all of the recommendations you have made, and I'm pleased to say that many of them already are having a very significant impact. Just earlier this month, on International Women's Day, for example, I was able to accept the report of the Misogyny and Criminal Justice Working Group. And that group was established as a result of a recommendation from the very first report of the Advisory Council. And of course, it was led by one of the Phase 1 members of the group, Helena Kennedy. That report itself is powerful, it's thoughtful, it's persuasive, it makes a really compelling case for new legislation to tackle misogynistic conduct and behaviour. And of course, we're still considering as government the fine detail of its conclusions, but I have no doubt that its recommendations will lead to further and long-lasting positive change, and that's a real achievement for the Advisory Council. Another recommendation you made in year 1 was that we should incorporate the UN Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination against Women into Scots law. The Scottish Government has now committed to doing just that, so far as the powers we have will allow us to, and we've committed to doing that within this parliamentary session. This council is also the reason why the Scottish Government now has a standalone Directorate for Equality, Inclusion and Human Rights. Since 2020, it has been helping to enhance and raise the status of the government's equalities work. And in response to your Year 3 recommendations, we're also taking important steps to advance gender budgeting. For example, we've provided funding to the Scottish Women's Budget Group to help it promote and build capacity for gender budgeting among civil society groups and local authorities. And I know you'll be hearing a bit more about that work shortly. And we will soon be publishing new proposals in relation to the Scottish Government's own budget process. So these are just some examples of the way in which recommendations of the Council are already being turned into action. But I hope they give a sense of the huge difference that the work of the Advisory Council is already making. So I really today want to take the opportunity to thank everyone who has contributed to its success so far, and that is an awful lot of people, both on the Council and of course in the wider circle. First and foremost, though, I do want to thank Louise MacDonald and Emma Jackson and all of the other members of the Council for the incredibly hard work that has been done. And again, of course, as I did at the outset, pay a heartfelt tribute to the contribution of Emma Rich, a real leading light of this group. And I want to thank the members of the wider circle and all those who have engaged, whether that's been digitally, because, of course, of the impact of the pandemic, or through in-person events. All of your efforts over these past few years are hugely appreciated by me, by the government, but I think most importantly of all, they will be appreciated by generations to come of women and girls in Scotland and perhaps further afield as well. So the task now is to ensure that all of that progress that you have already helped achieve can continue, that it does continue, that we build on it, and that we embed the progress made so far. To that end, I welcome the report you published last year on the Advisory Council's next steps. The report set out how the Council could evolve from a group tasked primarily with producing recommendations to one focused on delivery. And that model has very much informed the new remit, which I have agreed with the Council's new co-chairs, Talit and Anna. And I thank them very much for taking on this responsibility. Under the new remit, the Advisory Council will, of course, retain the ability to make recommendations, for example, in response to new or changing circumstances affecting women and girls. And we know that this is a tough time for everybody. But as Louise said, the pandemic has very much shone a light on the existing inequalities, and the cost of living crisis, of course, is going to in some ways exacerbate those. So it's important that there is space to make new recommendations. But the main focus of the Council for the next 3 years will be on assessing the impact and scrutinising the implementation of the Council's previous recommendations. And that change in emphasis is also reflected in the refreshed membership of the group, which has a very strong focus on policy expertise. I want to thank all of the new members of the Council for agreeing to serve, but I also want to thank those of you who are continuing your membership. That will be important in ensuring some continuity, and those of you who had a hand in making the recommendations, helping to ensure that those recommendations are implemented. So that collective knowledge and experience, alongside that of the wider circle, is, I know, going to be a huge asset to the Council during this second phase. As you know, your efforts will now be supplemented by the creation of a new review group comprising women from marginalised communities. Their experiences will help to inform and guide the work of the Council over the next 3 years. And that kind of wider engagement has been really central to all of the work that the Advisory Council has done since 2017. And in this new phase, it will continue to be vital in helping all of you reflect the experiences of women and girls in all of our beautiful diversity right across Scotland. Now, when I look back, because this is a time, I suppose, for reflection from me as well as for you, when I became First Minister back in 2014, which only seems like 5 minutes ago, but is a lot longer than that, I said then that I really hope my election as the first woman to hold this office would help to show every girl and every woman that in Scotland there is no glass ceiling on ambition. That principle, that vision, that ambition that everyone in our society has an equal right and should have an equal opportunity to succeed is central to everything I try to do and everything that my government tries to do every single day. In recent years in particular, I think we have made some real progress towards that ambition, but I am under no illusion that we still have a very, very long way to go. Over the past few years, the Advisory Council on Women and Girls has done a fantastic job of identifying the changes our society needs to make. And in the next 3 years, you will continue to have a central role in making sure these changes come to fruition so that that ambition in Scotland can become a reality. So today's meeting is an opportunity to reflect on how you go about that. And I am delighted that you have all taken the time to be part of this today. So once again, I want to thank all of you who have contributed to the success of the Council so far. I want to thank all of you for your commitment to the cause of gender equality in Scotland. And I very, very much look forward to seeing how the Council takes forward this new phase of its work. Thank you and best wishes for what I know you are going to do in the years ahead.
Thank you very much, First Minister. Thank you for offering of your reflections there. It's all been incredibly helpful to hear how you felt the phase one has gone, and really good to get a bit of insight into the early impact that the Council has had in terms of those recommendations that you've touched on. And I also just really want to thank you for your feminist leadership, ensuring and putting in place this Council so that we are able to take some meaningful steps towards women's equality in Scotland. My name is Anna Ritchie-Allen, and along with Tala Yacoub, we'll be leading phase 2 of the Advisory Council. I'm really delighted to be taking on this role with Tala, and it's really great to see so many people who've come along to the Circle meeting today. Tala and I would like to thank Louise and Emma, first of all, for their leadership and their dedication through phase 1. I think it's been clear from everything that's been said so far how much has been achieved under their leadership. And on behalf of the phase 2 council members, we'd like to thank all of the phase 1 council members who got us to this point. You produced a set of recommendations which are bold and wide-ranging, and we know that if they're implemented in line with the council's ambitions, that they will create change for women and girls in Scotland. So as has been mentioned already by the First Minister and by Louise, is that phase 2 is going to be a little bit different from phase 1. There are two, I suppose we see it as an opportunity to do things differently, really. There's 2 interrelated core elements that I'd like to talk, and then also come on to what the role of the Circle is going to be in phase 2. These 2 interrelated core elements, which First Minister has already mentioned, are accountability and participation. And we see this, as I mentioned, as an opportunity to do things differently. We see recommendations made all the time, but even when the recommendations are accepted, what we do see instead is an implementation gap. That is a routine problem that we see all the time. And Scottish Government has accepted the Advisory Council's recommendations. That is, of course, very welcome. But we do know that recommendations on paper don't create change. So what we want to do, first of all, is to build on the accountability days that were held in phase 1. And our aim in this next phase is to develop a Scottish model of accountability and scrutiny so that learning can be shared beyond this space, and hopefully that model can be applied in other areas too. So we'll be gathering evidence, we'll be asking difficult questions of Scottish Government officials, and we'll be providing challenge. And really welcome, I think the First Minister saying that she welcomes that challenge too. Because we know that if systemic change is to be realised, then that is the necessary steps that need to be taken. So our first task after today for the Council is to design that model. And we'll be coming back to the Circle once we've finalised our work plan to let you know how things are going to be progressing. In parallel with this work and related to it, we'll be convening a lived experience panel of women who will work with the Advisory Council to scrutinise the implementation of recommendations and also hold Scottish Government to account. Members will be drawn from community and grassroots organisations. They'll be women with lived experience of intersecting inequalities and poverty, and those who have less access to power and influencing. The panel will receive capacity building and payment for their work, and they will be supported and facilitated in their own work, but also they'll be identifying the direction that they take. So the recommendations and the topics that they want to focus on will be determined by them to ensure ownership. Ultimately, what we want to do is to deliver a good practice model for lived experience participation, because we see too often that this is tokenistic and this is not done effectively, and instead it results in poorer outcomes. So we'll let you know more about this work as it develops. And finally, we also wanted to take the time today to set out what our ambitions are for the Circle in phase 2. In phase 1, it's been clear that the Circle has galvanised widespread interest and excitement about the Council's work. And I think importantly, it's created a space where people could come together with a shared goal of advancing women's and girls' equality in Scotland. We want to see the Council mirroring the wider phase 2 activity, so moving from identifying solutions to taking action. And during phase 1, we were delighted that many members pledged to take action, but we're now keen to know how this has been taken forward and the change that you've seen in your workplaces, your organisations, and in your communities. We want to showcase good practice, and we'll create a space where members can share and learn from each other. And importantly, where there have been barriers, we want to know about those too. We want to know what additional support would be useful for Circle members. And the phase 2 Council is really looking forward to working with you and hearing all about the great work that you've been doing. And one other element that we're going to be considering, which the First Minister also touched on, it's making sure that we've got a capacity really to build in the here and now, because we know that since the first report of the Council was published, and even the third report, is that things have changed quite a bit. We know that COVID has had a disproportionate impact on women, and particularly marginalised women. And we know that we're entering one of the starkest cost of living crises, which will impact women disproportionately again, including those women who are from marginalised communities. So we're always going to be mindful of our current context, how that relates to the recommendations, but also be thinking about what else needs to be done to mitigate the impact of our economic context. So I'm shortly going to be handing over to my co-chair, Talat, who will be taking us through the presentations. Our presenters have been specifically invited because their work aligns with the Advisory Council recommendations, and we hope that this will give you in the Circle some food for thought. So before I hand over to Talat, I understand that the First Minister needs to leave us now. So on behalf of everyone, I really want to thank you, First Minister, for your time today. Really appreciate you making space for us in your busy diary, and we look forward to seeing you again. So thank you, First Minister.
Thank you.
And over to you now, Talat.
Thank you, Anna, and thank you to Louise and Emma for your comments and for the excellent leadership that you have shown in phase 1, giving us the foundations to be able to work on today. And thank you to all phase 1 members and the phase 2 members who have agreed to participate. As Anna said, my name is Talia Yaqub. I'm delighted to have been asked to be co-chair along with Anna, continuing on my membership as a phase 1 member through the first stage of the National Advisory Council. So you heard from Anna about what we want the Circle members to focus on in phase 2, and to help Circle members get into the mindset of action focus, because it's so critical that we take responsibilities for the spaces we occupy. We will have 2 short presentations. We're going to hear from Heather Williams, who's the training lead at the Scottish Women's Budget Group. Heather will be giving us some insights into good gender budgeting, and as well as pointing to useful resources and training that you as Circle members can participate in. Following that, we'll hear from Douglas Knox and Ella Hashimi, who will be discussing women's underrepresentation in the workplace and what they have been doing to tackle women's underrepresentation at Forestry and Land Scotland. Both gender budgeting and women in the workplace were recommendations within the first phase of the National Advisory Council, and we hope to be able to support you within your role within the spaces you occupy to take that forward. But before I invite the speakers to present, I want to add a little bit to the space that we're talking in at the moment and set the tone for how we will be working as a National Advisory Council. When we talk about gender equality, we cannot pursue that assuming that women are a homogenous group. For example, we know that working class women of colour are significantly more likely to be locked into low pay and precarious work. That is the intersecting inequalities of race, class, and gender. We must understand that intersecting inequality to be able to competently deliver for the women who need change the most, the women furthest away from access to power, opportunity, and wealth. That is the purpose of an intersectional perspective. That is the purpose of intersectional delivery. And when we talk about women and girls as National Advisory Council, our work will be intersectional in understanding that we have to start from the women that are most marginalised to be able to deliver for all women and girls in Scotland. We don't want intersectionality or intersectional analysis to be something that's done on the side. It will be threaded through as part of the core element of the work that we do as National Advisory Council Women and Girls. Intersectionality and an understanding of intersecting and compounding inequalities is fundamentally about rejecting oppression and inequality across all areas for all women. And if we develop policies and systems and services for those most marginalised, we will make them fit for purpose for all. So what does that require? It requires delivery that understands and tackles intersecting inequalities. It requires, for example, anti-racist delivery and disability inclusion built into gender equality work and initiatives. Otherwise, we will only be working for those who already have at least some access to opportunity. I invite you as a circle to consider what potential learning, challenge and support you feel you require to be able to truly deliver an intersectional approach to women and girls inequality, and also tell the National Advisory Council how we and others can facilitate that. Part of the presentations that you're seeing now are an opportunity to reflect on resources and opportunity to engage further that are available to help you move some of the recommendations that we've already gathered, some of the conversations you had in the years before, into action and change and delivery in the spaces you are in. I invite you to reflect on presentations, resources and examples being shared and consider how you can challenge gender inequality in the spaces you occupy through a nuanced, power redistributive and intersectional lens. So I want to take an opportunity essentially to really emphasise the need for the work of the Circle and the work of the Council to pursue intersectional gender equality and work for the women who are furthest away from opportunity and the most marginalised. I'll now delighted to invite Heather Williams to speak to us about gender budgeting, to be able to give the Circle some insights on the things that you may be able to get involved in, so you can tell us more about what you're doing and so that we're able to share the learning and the participation work that you will be getting involved in. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Talat. I'm just going to quickly share my screen. Okay, thanks very much. So gender budgeting, the core purpose of it is to change policies, programmes and resource allocation so that they promote gender equality. Ultimately, because men and women lead such different lives and they don't enjoy equal rights and opportunities, that means that our experiences, our needs and our priorities are different. There are differences between men and women in our employment and our earnings and receipt of benefits and our use of public services and our obligations for unpaid care work. And that means that policy and spending the impact of policy and spending decisions will often be different. And these differences mean that policies which appear neutral on the surface may have unintended consequences, including increasing gender inequality. So, for example, entitlements to state benefits and pensions, they're often tied to full-time paid employment over a lifetime. And women who work in the informal economy or who do not work full-time all their lives because they're caring for children, parents or other family members are often disadvantaged and are more likely to experience poverty at all points in their lifetime. And often we hear that government budgets and policies are often assumed to affect everyone more or less equally to serve the public interests and the needs of the general person. And until now, that average citizen target has been white, they've been male, and they've often been middle class. And I suppose gendered budgeting is about taking a lens to those decisions to understand how that different impact is on different people. Because we know that these decisions aren't necessarily made on purpose by individuals or organisations because they're purposely being sexist or racist or because they're consciously acting in that way. It's because of that gender blindness, but fails to see the impact of gender norms and expectations and how they impact on people's lives and exacerbates inequality. And I suppose a recent example of that for myself was I was at an International Women's Day in Edinburgh in the City Chambers, and the Lord Provost was there, and it was an event around getting a statue for Elsie Ingalls in Edinburgh. And the Lord Provost made a statement that there are about to be 2 new statues to men erected in Edinburgh, and if only women could raise more money, there would be more statues for women across Scotland. Now, he wasn't purposely ignoring the fact that women have lower pay, have less disposable income, and his head was if we could just put a bit more towards statues, there would be more statues for women. And similarly, last year around International Women's Day, Scottish Widows had a social media campaign where they highlighted the pension pay gap. And rather than having an understanding that was because of women's lower earnings, and for example, basically their response was that women just had to save more to address the pension pay gap. So often these inequalities which are built into our systems and our processes, they're done because of that gender blindness, because we don't look at the impact that our decisions will have on a wider group of individuals. So I think it's worthwhile saying that gender budgeting is not about a special budget for women. It is basically, it's a critical review of how budgetary allocations affect the economic and social opportunities of women and men, and it seeks to restructure revenue and spending decisions to eliminate unequal outcomes. And ultimately, it's just good budgeting, because if we are to ensure that that there is intersectional gender budgeting, it's about recognising the different and multiple disadvantages that some women face. So we need to be thinking about the impact on people in terms of how money is raised and how they're lost, how money is spent, whether spending is sufficient to meet the practical and strategic needs of men and women, and how decisions on raising and spending money affect unpaid care work. And whether spending in practice matches budget policy and plans. One of the things that we know is that we can have governments and policymakers can have good intentions, but is that actually followed up by the resources that are required to make those, to bring those good intentions to life, if you like. There are a number of different approaches to gender budgeting. We can take a policy-based approach where we start with, we look at policy areas where the evidence suggests that work could be carried out to close gaps, and we can then use data to look at the impact and the changes that are needed there. Or you can take an account-based gender budgeting approach where you actually look at you start with an analysis of the budget. There are many different ways in which gender budgeting can be undertaken. And if people are interested in a bit more information around that, the Scottish Women's Budget Group runs open training for anyone who's interested in finding out more and finding out how they can use this approach within their work. We also have a programme at the moment where we are working with civil society and groups of women who are to help them to identify issues that are important to them and how gender budgeting can be used to highlight those issues We're working with groups from Glasgow Disability Alliance, from Grampian Women's Aid, from MECOP, and from the Fosside Women and Girls group. And we're trying to bring, I suppose, gender budgeting alive to groups that potentially this wouldn't be something that would necessarily think of as an approach to take. In terms of, when we're thinking about gender impact assessment and gender budgeting, we need to look at the impact on individuals as well as households. Often when we're talking about budgets or when we're thinking about economics, we think about households and we think about a benevolent head of the household. But in reality, we know that interests within households may differ. So while policies may benefit a household's decision maker, it may not benefit all household members. So we need to be looking at across the members of a household. We also have to take a lifetime perspective wherever we possibly can. So what are the policies' long-term effects? For example, policies that make it easier for women to stay doing unpaid care work may have a negative impact on women's lifetime earnings and pensions in old age, and vice versa. Policies which encourage women into the workplace can have an impact on their ability can have an impact on unpaid care. So we need to be looking at it from that kind of lifetime perspective. We need to take account of the effects on the unpaid care economy. About recognising that that unpaid care is not free as much as we may think it is. There is a value to it in society, and we need to be making sure that that is accounted for and how we look at that. And we also need to make sure we're looking at differences within particular groups of women and men wherever possible. So differences in relation to race, in relation to class and disability, and make sure that we're aware of those as well. And we also have to quantify the differences wherever possible. Too often we see within equality impact assessments the idea that there will be no difference between, in terms of the protected characteristics between kind of men and women. But actually, because of the differences in how we live our lives, there are very few policies or very few spending decisions or finite revenue raising decisions that won't have a different effect on different groups. So we need to be able to try and quantify that. And I suppose one of the things that we were asked was what are our kind of top three tips. So for gender budgeting to be successful, we need a collection of sex disaggregated and gender sensitive data. We also need to see data around that's specific for race and ethnicity, and also has indices of disadvantage, including disability. So data is key. And if we don't have the current data, we need to look at data currently. Then we need to look at how do we gather that data. Public authorities and civil society need to be involved. There needs to be policymakers at all levels and in all areas need to understand about gender and the impact of gender and on the differences that has, that those gender norms and gender expectations have on women and men's lives. So we need that gender competence, if you like, within our public authorities. And there needs to be training and capacity building. There also needs to be a commitment across organisations. We've seen in other countries where gender budgeting has been something that has happened, but when there's been change in political governments, that gender budgeting has fallen by the wayside. Australia being one of the key ones, that's an example of that. So we need to make sure that there's commitment across organisation, that is embedded, and that also that when we're looking at gender budgeting, that we look at it across things like road building and snow clearing and house street lighting and things like that, and not just in relation to things like care and violence against women, things that are traditionally seen as women's issues. I suppose ultimately, and the fact that Talit was given this the introduction, we need to increase the number of women in budget decision-making positions. So we need to have more women in positions of where they can make decisions and have that ability to direct, make sure there's a focus on this issue. issue. If anyone's looking for further information, apologies, it's a really quick run through of gender budgeting, then our website, you can get some information there. You can find out about our events. As I say, we have an open training calendar. There's also information about the current project that we have, where we're working with local authorities and also civil society groups, and you can also get in touch with us via email if you've an interest and want to find out more, or you'd like to know more about how you could embed this approach within your organisation and your work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Heather. And you're right, it is a very whistle-stop tour of the work that you do, but the purpose of these presentations is to give a little bit of insight into the resources, the expertise and the insights that exist elsewhere for those who are members of the Circle and beyond to participate in, get some knowledge from, and be able to embed this into your workplace and into the practice within your organisations. Like I said before, we're trying to gather case studies and the good work that you're doing and the challenges that you've had to be able to create a picture of what's happening in Scotland, and crucially to create a bit of a tipping point of people taking responsibility for gender equality in the spaces they occupy. By that tipping point coming together, those dots will be joined together, and therefore we'll be able to come a significant step further towards gender equality and intersectional gender equality within Scotland, for as we can create a society that is fairer for women and girls. But we all need to take responsibility for the place that we are in. I hope that you have taken some ideas and inspiration from that. The budgeting process within all of our organisations is likely to be gender blind. To be able to have insights from the Scottish Women's Budget Group, whether that's through their training, reading their literature, are resources that I would really recommend you look into, and then talk to us about how you are using those things. I'll now move on to our second presentation with Douglas Knox and Ella Hashimi. Thank you so much for you both for coming along. They will be talking about work they have done with Forestry and Land Scotland, specifically on women's underrepresentation in male-dominated environment.
Hi, good afternoon. Can I just check that people can hear me okay? Yep, thanks, Talit. I'll just try sharing my screen there. And can I just get an acknowledgement, a verbal acknowledgement that you can see my screen okay? I can't see you, but
I can see it, Doug.
That's great. Thanks very much. Well, thanks for the invite to come speak, and congratulations, Talit and Anna, on your appointment as co-chairs. We certainly look forward to working with you, the Council and the Circle in the coming years as you take forward this important agenda. The brief from Talit for today was to give an honest narrative about successes and challenges in relation to work we've been doing on gender equality and wider intersectional equalities, and what we think we could do and others could do more of, perhaps. So we'll talk a little bit about the challenges that we faced, some of the history that we're, if you like, dealing with as an organisation in relation to gender equality as a topic. We'll talk a little bit how it is very much a continuing journey for us in Forestry and Land Scotland. It's important to emphasise it's not by any stretch of the imagination a short-term period of time. We need to be at this as a strategic endeavour, and as the First Minister says, there's a long road to go, and then we would certainly say that from a perspective in Forestry and Land Scotland, there's much for us to do. So just a little bit about me. I'm Doug Knox. I head up a group called Technical Services in Forestry and Land Scotland, and I'm a forester by background, and I lead a team of subject matter experts in various forestry matters in Scotland. And I'll just let Ella say a little bit about herself and who she is.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ella Hashimi, and I'm the Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Manager at Forestry and Land Scotland. So I support staff across the whole organisation to embed equality into their practice.
So we'll just hopefully share a few ideas and things we've been working on, and challenges we've faced, and things we hope to take forward in the future. So just a little bit of context. we have a long history as an organisation. 100 years or so, we were established as the Forestry Commission in 1919, and yeah, this was the, if you like, the typical management within forestry, and funnily enough, this is a site that some of my team work at in North Scotland when we acquired a farm in 1931 and turned it into a tree nursery to grow young trees. So we have a lot of baggage, if I can say that, as an organisation, and we've got a lot of work in front of us, and some of the issues we have are quite deep rooted. So this was just an illustration of that. Hopefully things are moving on in the right direction, but we'll speak a little about that. Our vision is to ensure we have forests and lands that the people of Scotland can be proud of, and to look after those forests and land for the benefit of all now and in the future. And we have a staff group of about 950 people that work across 5 regions in Scotland. And ultimately, our job is to manage these public forests, these national forests and land, in a way that's economically, environmentally and socially sustainable. And we do that on behalf of Scottish ministers and to help them fulfil their obligations as leaders of sustainable forest management under the Forest and Land Management Act. So that's us as an organisation, quite a broad range of things that we do across a number of, if you like, business areas, but also I'll pick up on the different sectors that we can hopefully have an influence on. As an agency of the Scottish Government, it's really important. We became an agency of Scottish Government in 2019 when we ceased to be the Forestry Commission in Scotland. We became part of the Scottish Government. So our work is very much guided by the National Performance Framework. And whilst we seek to contribute to all of the national outcomes, there are some in particular that we have a key role to play in, and those are the ones that you see on the screen. So at a high level, our equality outcomes are really were set, as we became an agency of Scottish Government, really to help us retain a bit of a focus on some of the significant issues that we have as we've transitioned to become a part of Scottish Government, and to help increase the capacity and the performance of FLS as an industry leader in forestry, but also as an employer. So we're, I suppose, in some ways quite unique and have an opportunity to use our position to help drive change, I would suggest. We are civil servants, we are part of Scottish Government, but we are part of a wider forestry profession and part of a wider forest industry. So whilst we are in the public sector managing Scotland's national forests and lands, we're a big player in a wider industry, and we try and use that to bring about change. And so we've done quite a lot of work partnering with the Institute of Chartered Foresters and with the Confederation of Forest Industries to really try and drive change in this important area, to try and do more to make the forest industry a more inclusive place, to try and do more to address the gender balance issues within the forest industry. So we see that as an opportunity for us as not just civil servants, but as part of a wider industry to help with that. We also have a number of business activities on Scotland's national forests and lands, and when we, if you like, offer up the opportunity for others to undertake business activities on the estate, we've found there's some opportunities there to drive change in other sectors. So for example, in the renewable energy sector, we did an equality impact assessment to have a look at, what we were planning to do in terms of business opportunities there, and realised this was very much a male-dominated sector, but one that we as forest managers could hopefully have a positive impact on and do something about. So in preparing an EQIA, we understood that. That led us to then introduce 2 questions within the tendering exercise for renewables companies to develop sites on the National Forest Estate. First question was to ask bidders to supply their equality and diversity policy, to just really make sure we could understand how committed they were to that, and if they didn't have a policy, that they needed to put that in place. So that was a gateway question that they had to pass to get through to be able to then talk in further detail about business proposals with us. And the second question was asking developers, renewable energy developers, how they will ensure equality and diversity in relation to the project and to these particular schemes in the state. And we're asking for examples of the kinds of measures that they would put in place to address that. So that was us, with an opportunity to engage with another sector to try and make a positive difference. And we're also trying to obviously promote women in the workplace and to promote our highly skilled women in different professions, and whilst forestry is maybe a core profession, we also have a big cohort of civil engineers within the organisation. So this is just an example of trying to create platforms, promoting and encouraging women into sectors where they have traditionally been quite male dominated. So there's a lot more for us to do on that front, but we try and take the opportunities as they present themselves on that across the different professions that we have within the organisation, civil engineering being just this example here. In terms of challenges, Tala asked us to maybe think a little bit about the challenges we've had, and I would just like to highlight the really fantastic experience we've had working with Equate Scotland. However, that was a real challenge for me as a manager. I had my confidence knocked a bit with that when I took that proposal forward to our head of HR. She was quite concerned about the legalities of taking positive action, and all quite nervous about it. And it took a lot of work from me to persuade and encourage and say, look, Equate Scotland are here, they're set up, they're supported by government to bring about positive actions here. And I guess it was just reflecting on it today with Ella, that was quite a challenge for me. It knocked my confidence. And I'm sure I'm not alone when there's a number of people really keen to take positive actions and to try and bring about positive change. But when my HR professionals were having sharp intakes of breath and expressing some concerns, it just kind of caught me off balance. Fortunately, we did take forward a number of pieces of work with Equate Scotland. I can't recommend working with them highly enough. It was fantastic. We have had a number of cohorts of young women joining us for placements. Fantastic for the business, fantastic for the individuals concerned. It's helped create a talent pipeline in the organisation. It's really helped us understand how we can be more inclusive, how we can support more young women get into STEM and so on. So that's been fantastic. We've also learned that working with cohorts is really good as well, because they can support each other, and you can get more from them as a team. And they've gone on to great things within our organisation, outside our organisation. They've gone on to do PhDs that are in subjects that are of interest to us, and we've supported and funded them. Just examples of the positive destinations that some of these Equate Scotland placements have helped young women get to. So that's been really positive from our perspective. Reverse mentoring and reverse mentoring has been a really important part of that as well. Very lucky within the sector to have some senior leaders who are really helping drive change and making decisions at senior levels. Mary McCallan, MSP, is our minister. Carol McGuinness there, one of our regional managers, picture with Mary McCallan. Our chief forester in Scotland, appointed by ministers, Dr. Helen Mackay, fantastic, has a background in STEM as a forest researcher, now really leading in the sector, and Liz Barron, who was head of the School of Forestry where I studied, Scottish School of Forestry, and now director for Land Trust Scotland, helping and working with us, and we work closely with her to try and drive change. I'll not go through these in great detail, but suffice to say that there are a number of recent positive actions that we're trying to take forward there, and in a number of ways. And I think Ella's maybe now going to pick up on a few of the things that we see as key challenges and things we need to take forward. So Ella, I'll hand over to you at this point.
Thanks, Doug. So I just joined the organisation last month. So a big part of what I'm doing now is just observing the organisation, getting to know what the real challenges are. But hopefully you've heard from Doug that this change is not something where you can snap your fingers and suddenly we have gender equity, as I'm sure you all know. This is a journey towards being a mature organisation in the context of gender, and it's about creating long-term embedded change. Slide, please. So the kind of things that I'm thinking about very briefly are looking at the data around gender. So there was a successful declaration campaign encouraging staff to disclose their equality data. That was very successful, and now it's a chance to continue and extend that. And there's been a number of mentions of intersectionality already today. And there's a need to look at intersectional gender. So currently the organisation looks at gender, looks at race, looks at disability, all as very distinct identities. And what's needed now is to look at how they combine. Next slide again. around representation. This is one of our trees and timber apprentices who last month won an ANTRA award. So Doug was mentioning around positive action, and it's clear from his story alone what's needed is to build confidence across the organization and how to use positive action, especially in recruitment. Most of our staff are in rural areas in Scotland, and for me that brings up a question around how we address intersectional diversity in rural areas. So these are places where there aren't, for example, that many ethnic minority communities. So coming up with some clarity around how we're looking at intersectional diversity, and also thinking about a gender progression plan. Doug highlighted incredible female senior leaders in the sector, and currently there's I would say bottom heavy. So although there's women in the organization, a lot of them are further down the organization. It's how we can support them to take on leadership positions. And last slide. Inclusion. So this is how we can be as welcoming of an organization as possible. I want to understand more within the staff body the impact of COVID and flexible working on women. But it's more than that. It's about ensuring that any staff in any part of the organization feels welcome, feels that they belong. And there's been engaging the bystander training rolled out in certain regions of the organization, which is a training which challenges people to challenge microaggressions within the workplace and beyond. I would like to build on that training and also bring a systemic approach to challenging behaviours. So looking at the root causes of things like bullying and harassment. I think that's everything. This was a very brief, brief look at what we're up to, but thank you very much. And we just had our contact details up there in case you want to share stories with us or share any stories of becoming in your own organisations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Douglas and Ella. And it was a pleasure to work with you both when I was at Great Scotland, and I'm glad that that relationship has continued. Again, these are examples of what can be done. And I think it's really important. The point that was made there by Ella is that this is long-term. It's the change doesn't happen overnight. It's long-term. And yet at times it will feel like a difficult slog, but actually the impact, the change in organisations can be huge, and the representation change that we've already seen at Forestry Land Scotland has shown that these positive action measures and beyond, and working on changing cultures within organisations can be hugely powerful. Particularly, I appreciate that both Douglas and Ella mentioned a multiple intervention approach, because a single there is no silver bullet here, but multi-intervention approaches are what will make a difference within our organisations. So I hope that that has provided some source of inspiration, ideas of what you can do as Circle members, whether it's training through gender budgeting and the Scottish Women's Budget Group, or it's getting in touch with Douglas and Ella to talk about how they created their internal strategies, how they pursued positive action measures, and what they need to do within training, development and knowledge building within their own organisations. These are all things that we can take responsibility for. And I really look forward to hearing from you as Circle members about what these things you have been doing. No pressure, but I will be emailing you all individually to find out what exactly you've been doing. So thank you very much indeed. And I wanted to open this up to, we've got 10 minutes left, slightly less than I'm afraid, because there was so much great conversation within the presentations, but open it up to questions. You should have the Q&A function available for you to be able to ask questions. You can ask them directly of me, or you can ask them to those who have presented, or to our excellent Phase 1 co-chairs. And that was quick. We already have one, which is specifically asking how will we ensure that marginalised women are involved in the participation work. I'm happy to take that, as Anna mentioned, that we will be having a separate strand of work that is specifically focused on participation of the most marginalised women. And that is to ensure that we are opening up access to power to those who are furthest away from power currently, and also for whom public policy has the biggest impact. Poor public policy and poor implementation has the biggest impact. So to enable us to do that, we will be reaching out to grassroots, community-based organisations and asking them to put women and girls forward who would want to participate in that group. We're hoping that it would be at least 20 strong, but we will be focusing on, rather than national organisations, largely organisations that have clusters that are within communities, to be able to ensure that, firstly, that they have support mechanisms within communities, but also that they are women who are on the ground and who haven't engaged within policy making before, or have not had access to that before. We'll be coming back to you with more information about that too. We've had one question that's on gender budgeting. Would this include marginalised groups as well as those with protected characteristics? We know the Equality Act only protects one aspect at a time. However, given that we have a global economy and with the future implementation of human rights conventions, it would make sense to future-proof any policy recommendations. So that's about marginalised groups of women and intersectionality, really. Heather, if you're there, would you like to answer that question?
Hi, Talat. Yep, absolutely. In terms of the approach that we take to gender budgeting, is absolutely it's an intersectional approach. We're also doing some work around how we line up gender budgeting with human rights budgeting to make sure that these things work and complement each other, because I think it's that thing about just because there's a human rights approach, we can't assume that there will be a gender lens put on it. So we're trying to work to look at how we match those two things up.
Thank you, Heather. Anna, did you want to add to that at all?
No, I suppose it's just, the council has made a recommendation on gender budgeting, which is obviously why we've invited Scottish Women's Budget Group along. And I think hopefully it's clear that, the council's commitment is very much to taking an intersectional approach, and we don't see gender budgeting as being just for all groups of women. And that is, I think Heather actually put in her presentation the need to have that intersectional data, if marginalised women are to also benefit in an equal way from public spend. So just to, I suppose, reassure that is very much the approach that we're taking.
Thank you. We've had a question here. Is there anything that this group is doing to help women and girls in Ukraine and those who are refugees here? Just to add to that, and it's a point well made, that of course there are multiple things that are happening, whether by grassroots organisations, charities and fundraising that is going on through communities themselves, and also as the Scottish Government has been granted, I think it's special status to be able to give support to and give access to refugee support routes for those who are leaving Ukraine, asylum seekers leaving Ukraine. Within the work that the National Advisory Council is doing, although there isn't a focus here, we would hope that the work that we are doing on participation would absolutely include refugee women and asylum seeking women and girls. And we will be again going to community groups that are focused on that to enable us to engage women and ensure that we do that in a trauma-informed way, in a facilitated and supportive way as far as possible. I've got a question here to say for Douglas and for Ella, to ask Forestry and Land if they could say a bit more about the negotiations with HR regarding positive action. How do they get beyond their caution worries around it? That must be very common in many organisations.
Sure. Yeah. I think the big, if you like, top cover that I had to, pursue this was the fact that I could point to Equate being recognised by Scottish Government, by funding by Scottish Government, by saying, look, we are a Scottish Government agency, you should take confidence from that. And it's about connecting some of my HR colleagues with some of Talat's former colleagues in Equate Scotland. We were able to give that reassurance, but it caught me off guard and knocked my confidence a bit on that and a few other things. And so I just encourage people, I think Ella and I recognise, and Ella can maybe say a little bit more about it, but I think we've got a job to do in terms of building confidence. We've got a lot of people who would like to do more and I think are able to do more, but they're just not confident enough. Ella, do you want to say a little bit on that?
Yeah, well, perhaps just to say that HR tends to be quite a compliance-led discipline, and so to enable HR colleagues to feel confident in the compliance will then enable managers to feel supported by them. That's the approach that I'm hoping to take moving forwards.
Thank you so much, both. And it's certainly something that I experienced when I was working at Equate Scotland, so getting over the initial caution. And it's also about tackling the idea that equality means doing the same thing for everybody when our starting points are not the same. I have a question here about how will we ensure accountability of leadership in order to allow for a more inclusive and flexible working environment for women and girls? What mechanisms have been considered for phase 2? This also relates to some recommendations within phase 1 as well. I wonder, Louise, would you like to come in? Just say, how will we ensure accountability of leadership in order to allow for more inclusive, flexible working environments for women and girls?
So thanks for that, Tala. I suppose I'm trying to figure out if that means more broadly about the issues around flexible working for women and girls. So Nazaya, I'm hoping I get that. I hope I answer this well enough. I suppose there's the piece around accountability for the Advisory Council itself, which we've been really thoughtful about, which is why we've been really open and transparent in all of our work. We've done that, and I kind of try to make sure that all of the work that we've done, we've been sharing with the circle and have shared that kind of information and made the circle as open as we can, but also then, of course, put out our reports and information and so on kind of websites. So we've been thoughtful about that ourselves, but also that kind of accountability, leadership and the responsibility of those in leadership positions around this has been something that's been central all the way through the work that we've done. More broadly around flexible working environments, which I'm as I say, I'm not quite sure what the angle is on your question there, so let me hope that I get that right. We've done spotlight topics on our website, focusing specifically around this employability work, and that's covered the whole range. So whether that's older women, whether that's menopause at work, around caring responsibilities, around progression, there's a whole raft of content around work, fair work, those kind of things on the digital platform. So there's lots there, and that will remain as a content archive for people to look at as well. So we've really talked about that. I think in terms of accountability of leadership and working environments and women, then actually there are an increasing number of mechanisms ranging from gender pay gap reporting, of course, but all the way through to some of the governance responsibilities around ESG that are starting to become much more powerful levers. So I think that there are now more levers that we can start to pull around accountability and leadership around flexible working environments for women and girls. So I hope that helped a little. Thanks.
Thanks very much, Louise. Yeah, I want to come to you specifically on that leadership question as well, and leadership being such an important thread through the first phase. Anna, given as your Executive Director at Close the Gap as well as doing this, the question about accountability around flexible working opportunities within the workplace, how better can Scotland create accountability of the environments in which women work?
Well, I suppose it depends on what context it is, really. I think we've seen quite a lot of rhetoric about how COVID has produced this sustainable change in terms of a new way of working. But I suppose that means, who are we talking about when we say that? Because we know that even at its peak, less, I think just over 40% of people were working from home, but they were very particular types of workers, and women are less likely to be able to work from home because they're in those service delivery roles and customer facing roles and out in the community doing work and so on, in those undervalued jobs. We do have flexible working regulations, but they lack teeth. The UK government has consulted on changing them, and then responded with, I think, a response that wasn't quite as strong enough as we would have liked to have seen. But really what it comes down to is individual employers and leading that culture change from the top. So I suppose that does go back to the point that Louise was making about leadership accountability in particular. But also we know the role of line managers is so important in creating microcultures within teams and creating inclusive ways of working so that women are able to manage any caring roles that they have outside the workplace, but also creating an environment that's free from discrimination.
Thank you, Anna. I'm very aware of time, so I'm afraid we're going to have to close there. I know there's been a flurry of questions that have just come in, and I don't know if they've been coming in through the day, and I've only just got them, so apologies for that. We'll make time for that in the future, I hope. In terms of the membership of the council, just to advise you that there will be a website that will be going live and will be updated for you to be able to hear not just about who all the members are of phase 2, but also our plans so far. It will also be the same place in which we'll be coming out to you as Circle members to share your thoughts, your case studies, and that's where you'll be able to find your stories to be shared and learning to be done together too. As I close the session, I just want to be able to say my thanks to the First Minister and Minister McKelvey, Circle members and Scottish Government officials for joining us today and for your help to support the launch of phase 2. Thank you, of course, to phase 1 council members and co-chairs Emma and Louise. Thank you to all of the staff and our wonderful interpreters that have been here doing the hard work for us and ensuring that we can be as accessible as possible on this platform. We, of course, have a long way to go, but I believe that with the focus that we have on accountability, participation and implementation, we can genuinely make a change that will be felt by women and girls who need it the most. I really do look forward to working with you all again on this important work, and I look forward to hearing your stories about how you make change in the spaces you occupy. Thank you so much.